For a person like me, I'm a scholar, but I used to be young, so I have to talk about me a little bit. For a person like me who has experienced living under a military dictatorship, our 60th TED Scripps lecturer is particularly special. She has stood courageously fighting for truth and democracy in the face of the corruption and political harassment throughout her life. As a CNN correspondent across the Asia, as a reporter at a new broadcasting company in the Philippines, and as a co-founder of the top digital-only news site Rappler, she has led the fight for press freedom in Philippines. Particularly, as Rappler CEO, she has endured constant political harassment and arrest by the Duterte government, being forced to post bail 10 times to remain free. If you are a journalist, you know how hard it is. She has received numerous accolades from her courageous and journalistic integrity. In 2021, she was one of the 2 journalists awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of her efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. In 2022, she was appointed by the United Nations Secretary General to the leadership panel of the Internet Government Forum and serves as its vice chair. She's a professor of practice at the Institute of Global Politics at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, where she leads projects related to artificial intelligence and democracy. Her most recent book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, was released in November 22 and has been translated into more than 20 languages. I highly recommend you reading this book. You will be electrified, to be honest. In it, she not only diagnoses current media global politics, but also proposes solutions to the problems we face. I truly appreciate the ideas and vision she presents to us. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to welcome the 2025 Scripps Lecturer, Maria Ressa.
Thank you. Thank you. As I take. Thank you. Thanks so much. Look, we can tell you how you survive a dictator, how you fight a dictator. And I guess let me just start with the key part, right? About a decade ago, my government began to attack me and the news organization that I co-founded, Rappler. And who knew? The world turned upside down when I was first arrested. And then I kept getting arrested to the point that I had to workflow how to post bail, right? Do it quickly and then get back to work. But here's the good news, because I'll start with the good news first. That today, even though I still have to ask the Philippine Supreme Court for approval to travel, 8 out of the 10 criminal charges my government filed against me, I've won. 8 out of 10. Hope really does come from action, because when you're in the middle of it, you can't stand still, right? Because inaction actually can bury you. Here's the last thing before we jump into this. And I'll talk for roughly 30 minutes, and hopefully then I'd love to hear where you're coming from, questions, and maybe give you some answers. My country, the Philippines, under Rodrigo Duterte, who took office in 2016, a month later, Brexit happened, right? I always say the political dominoes began to fall in 2016. So when he took office, within a few hours, the first death in this brutal drug war happened. And that's what he used to make everyone afraid. But He stood for only one 6-year term. And then Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took over as president. We elected him in 2022. I'll show you how all of this happened. And I'd say, when you ask how the Philippines is today, we moved from hell to purgatory. But here's the best part. Even though I had to ask for approval to travel, I'm standing in front of you in Reno, while the man who tried to put me in jail for over a century was arrested and is in prison at The Hague. So doing the right thing is the right thing, and impunity ends. So remember that as the final point before I take you through some really dark things. So let's start here, right? You heard my book has been translated to over 22, 23 different languages, but it came out the same week as ChatGPT. So the reason I tell you that is because within 2 days of the book tour, I got a ChatGPT. Someone came up to me and said, "This is what ChatGPT said about your book." I was like, okay, well, that's cool. But the entire book is micro, macro. The macro of here's the chapter title, here's the pattern, and then the micro, the subtitle, is the personal lesson from that macro, right? But the entire book, the 10 chapters, is really about this one question, which is what everyone in a democracy around the world. Originally, I aimed it at Filipinos because I thought we gave up really quickly. But now I see it in everywhere around the world because fear works. And this is that question. What will you sacrifice for the truth? And I'll take you through why that becomes the one question. Every country and every culture slightly different. Some of the books the translations were fascinating. The French, so How to Stand Up to a Dictator became Resist a Dictator. The Swedish, I just came from Stockholm, and they told me that their translation actually said "stamp out a dictator." The Japanese, this is not anything about a dictator in Japanese. It's about social media, so very passive. Korean, the Korean one is pretty much the same. This I loved, Mandarin. It's in Mandarin. But this was something special to me because I actually made it to Georgia for the launch of this book. And if you know, Georgians began protesting in April last year, and since November have had daily protests, nightly protests through the kind of the coldest times. It's over 124 days where Georgians have been going out to the street, more than 10% of their population every night. And when the first journalist was arrested, her name is Mizia Amaglobeli, she held up, because she couldn't speak, she just held up that pink book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator. So it became the language of protest. That was cool. And this we just launched 2 weeks ago, March. It's in Mongolian, sandwiched between China and Russia. I'll summarize it for you in like 3 buckets. Better than ChatGPT. Because it's about courage. And actually, at a time, you'll see that from the morning, if you listen to me in the morning, I put a lot of blame on the technology, and I'll take you through why. This is the data. Because I've covered 1986 was the end of the almost 21 years of a dictatorship in the Philippines. And that's when I began my career as a reporter. And I covered the swing of every Southeast Asian country from one-man authoritarian rule to democracy. And the pendulum is swinging. And now at the tail end of my career, we're swinging right back, right? So here are the 3 big things. When you're talking about how the technology reached to the cellular level of a democracy, which is every single person, every voter in a democracy, and used our biology, hacked our biology to change the way we feel, the way we see the world, the way we act, the way we vote. When it goes down and you're targeted, then it becomes, how do you fight back? It's a person-to-person defense of a democracy. That's what you'll see in the book, and I'll take you through why. So that means that's why you have to listen and look around you, because that's also your community that will work with you. The second one is democracy doesn't die because military trucks roll in. Those days are gone. Democracy dies through death by 1,000 cuts, and not the Taylor Swift version. My team was like, you mean Taylor Swift? I said, no, I mean Al-Qaeda. Literally, death by 1,000 cuts. And what do I mean by that? It's like, it's like the way an autocrat comes at you is, it's like little paper cuts. But then you're bleeding from these cuts. And at a certain point, you are bleeding so much that the body politic dies. We went through it. Many other nations have gone through it. In fact, as of March this year, VDEM in Sweden said that 72% of the world today is under authoritarian rule, 72%, and that we are essentially electing illiberal leaders democratically, right? 72%. So death by 1,000 cuts, be aware. So you can't just bandage the cut. We somehow have to come together and deal with each of these, the bleeding out. And how do you do that? 3, you embrace your fear, right? Both personal and in your community. And that's the magic phrase, both for journalism and for how we fight for our rights. It's about building community. But how do we do it? You can't be afraid. And it's meant to make you afraid. So how do you do that? And this is personal for me. I thought through the worst case scenarios, and then I figured out, if that happened, what do I do for my company? We gathered ourselves and I laid it out. And then what we did, I gave every single person in Rappler the chance to leave when we came under direct attack by the government. I said, we will help you find a job in another news organization, because not everyone wants to go through this. I didn't say that it will come for everyone in our country anyway, but here's the best part. Not one reporter took that offer. And what we did was, I laid out the worst case scenarios, we workflowed it, and every quarter we drilled it. And what did that mean? A shutdown. We drilled a shutdown. Literally, if a dozen police came in there to put you in jail, what do you do? Right? So we drilled it. Embrace your fear. Because in the end, ultimately, democracy lives or dies with you. Right? Are you willing to voluntarily give up your rights? Here's what I mean by the battle for truth. I start with this because I think, and I've said this this morning, the match that set the dry kindling of our societies on fire is tech, right? After more than a decade of trying to work with tech, and Rappler, by the way, is a partner with every single tech company, including TikTok, including OpenAI, including every single tech company you can think of. But 3 years ago, I gave up on big tech, and we started building something called a Matrix Protocol chat app. And this is in iOS and Android and web. And the reason I just put it up is, if you want to try it, please tell me what is wrong, because this is kind of like doing Blue Sky or like doing Mastodon, but it is a federated global news system. That's what we're building today. This is the solution for the survival of news. This is what we're working on. Now, why do we have to do that? Why would little Rappler in the Philippines, about 120 people, median age is 23 years old, so very young, and we began in 2012. So we're 13, coming to 14 years. Here's where we began. Let's start with the context of everything, right? It began here, the amount of data. When people started talking about the ability to get massive amounts of data, we didn't really think much of it. And, when it was hotels, Airbnb, when it was cars, it was, we thought, oh, well, this is really good. This is helping all of us. When it hit the public information ecosystem, what we didn't realize was the kind of impact it would have. Because the change of scale changes it all. When you say a lie a million times, it becomes a fact, right? So look at it in my world, the world of journalism. You can change the essence by changing the amount. Again, it isn't the individual post, it's the cumulative impact, right? That's what becomes a behavior modification system. And where does it all begin? Because everyone is talking about AI. Let's just be clear what AI is. It's been around for a long time, for almost 70 years. And it was never the science. The scientists will tell us this. It was a marketing term, marketing. It's neither artificial nor is it intelligent, but it sounds really good, right? So that term has been applied to different types of technologies. And last year, two men, very different ways, right? Jeffrey Hinton and Demis Hassabis, they won the Nobel Prize for this. But why is that important? Because the AI prominence in 2023, more than 23 billion was invested in generative AI globally. But what is it based on? This very toxic surveillance model. We didn't have a name for the business model until 2019, right? And I'll take you through that. What are the harms that have happened? Here's the litany. I told you I was going to depress you a little bit. Don't worry, we won't end depressed. Surveillance and digital colonialism. Biased and oppressive AI systems, the exploitation of data workers. Manila was one of the places where we did all the cleaning up of first social media and now generative AI. Africa, Kenya is another place. Environmental damage from resource-intensive AI operations. How are you going to deal with climate change when we are burning it up and we're asked to do more? Distraction, and here's the part that's fascinating. Jeffrey Hinton will talk about, the existential risks of AI, and they are real, but no one is talking about the real damage that is already being done now, even as we speak, that has already been done. Genocide, 2018 in Myanmar, where both the UN and Meta, Facebook, sent people to Myanmar, and they both came out saying that genocide was enabled by Facebook. That was kind of interesting. Here are the two buckets, and I'll go through this fast now. You should time me. Can you time me to make sure I get to? So, because I can talk about this stuff forever. I will try not to bore you, but you need to understand the tech and how it's impacting you and your kids, right? And the next generation for our winners. So let's say the two buckets so far. Social media, where machine learning took all of us. If you have a Facebook or if you have a social media, does anyone here not have a cell phone? See what I mean? So, if you have a Facebook account or a social media account, machine learning comes in and makes a model of you, right? On Facebook last year, Consumer Reports said that Facebook took more than 2,338 different massive data sets to make a model of you. Replace the word model with clone. Did you say that it's okay to be cloned, right? So this is using that tech. All of us have been cloned, and then AI comes in and takes all of our clones, and that becomes the master database that's used to micro-target you. What's micro-targeting? It isn't the old advertising that media knew. Micro-targeting takes your weakest moment to a message and sells it to a company or country. Right? Did you say that you could? This is the insidious manipulation I talk about. That's social media. Now, generative AI, which comes in, has anyone here not tried ChatGPT? 1, 2, 3. Wow, 4. Everyone else has tried it, right? I now actually go through papers in my class. You have to actually tell me how you used LLMs, large language models. But guess what? Neither of these two tech are anchored in facts. In fact, social media in 2018, MIT said that their study found that social media spreads lies 6 times faster. That's 2018. That's before Elon Musk bought Twitter, right? And our data in the Philippines showed that if you use fear, anger, and hate, that it goes viral. Right, so there are 2 ways that you have information operations. You seed a meta-narrative, and then you pound it with fear, anger, and hate, opportunistically to spread it. So we'll talk about that more, and I'll show you how history can change if you use that. In generative AI, this technology is a probabilistic model, right? That's what the tech is based on. It isn't based on facts. In fact, here I go again with in fact, the best OpenAI or these LLMs can do right now is 16% error rate. If a journalist has a 16% error rate, you would be taken to court. We're legally accountable for the public sphere. Why is that important? Because in the Philippines, we have an average of 20 typhoons every year. And if we give the wrong information to someone looking to evacuate, or when they should evacuate, or why, that could mean the difference between life and death, which the LA fires actually showed, right? This is coming for all of us. This is why it's important to have facts. All right. Reno, you know this. This is the way social media was designed after the slot machines. They literally took opportunity, unpredictable reward. You can win, you can lose, but it's quick and you can repeat it again. Social media was designed that way. And here's the impact on us. So I'll focus first on social media. There's 3 levels: the personal, literally thinking fast, thinking slow. They found out that human beings are the same regardless of culture, language, or whichever country you are in the world. Regardless of that, they found that by design, we literally react the same way. If they hit fear, anger, and hate, we keep scrolling longer. And the end goal for all of this is to keep us scrolling. Right? It hacked our biology. But that meant, personally, if you change the way you feel, when the radicalization that I used to study for extremism and terrorism, the way the suicide bombers were radicalized online or in the real world for the Bali bombings in 2002, that radicalization process, I can give you a whole lecture on how that has now been unleashed on the public, right? So the radicalization process. So personal, sociological, we behave differently in groups. I talked about this a little bit, and this goes back to the 1960s studies of the Asch conformity studies. And then finally, the last one is emergent human behavior. The technology is changing us as people, and what will that mean for us? When the technology we are on encourages the worst of humanity, right? I always joke about this. I say it's almost like, if you're my generation, you remember the cartoon where there's a devil and an angel on your shoulder, right? And the devil is telling you, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. And then you have the angel saying, don't do it. That's not nice. You're not being kind. What social media did is it flicked the angel off your shoulder, grew the devil, and gave it a direct line into your nervous system. Designed to be addictive. And, okay, so what does it mean? For the first time and this is after all the studies have been done in other parts of the world, Vivek Murthy, the former Surgeon General of the United States, came out in 2023 with the impact on the youth. What did he say? Shortened attention spans, more sleeplessness, for young girls, for teenage girls, greater incidence of eating disorders. There's so many of these things that are there, right? Then he followed up that paper with the epidemic of loneliness. You are not alone. And yet the tech that we are on added to that, exacerbated by the pandemic lockdown. Here's what happened. Tribalism. This morning I talked a little bit about how one algorithm, the Friends of Friends algorithm, a growth algorithm of every single social media platform, created the filter bubbles, Eli Pariser calls it. But in the Philippines in 2016, if you were pro-Duterte, you moved further right. If you were anti-Duterte, if you use the Friends of Friends algorithm to grow your network, you move further left. And over time, that chasm grew. Replace Duterte with Trump, with Orban, with Erdogan, with any one of these countries where you have a digital populist who becomes an authoritarian leader. Doxing, dogpiling, bullying, and harassment. I spoke with a student today who went through bullying, right? Like, these are things we shouldn't have to go through. And frankly, to give more profit to these companies at our expense. It isn't a free speech issue, it's a safety issue. When I went to Facebook, before I go to the second part, when I went to Facebook and showed them some of the things I'll show you next, they said, "But Maria, you're a public figure." And I forgot to tell them that we have a constitution like the United States where journalists have certain protections in the Bill of Rights. Anyway, let me go to the next thing. So what did it all do? The massive impact, it is transformative. If you change the way you feel, the way you act, and the way you vote, do we have electoral integrity? Right? I have the evidence in almost every single country now where, I'll show you the data. In 2016, Russian disinformation targeted at least 126 million Americans. That's a fact, admitted. Facebook admitted that. UK, Brexit, similarly, Russian disinformation. Almost all of the countries where the book came out, but it took until 2024, December 2024, when Romania, little Romania, voided its election because of Kremlin interference. Could the United States have done that in 2016? Would the world be different if it did? Electoral integrity. And then this last part is that online violence is real world violence. When you live in a world of toxic hate, you take it home with you because there's only one of us in the virtual and physical world, right? And the two fracture lines across different countries around the world that are pounded open by information operations. So think about it like this. You are the enemy that is targeted for information operations. The two fracture lines is gender and race. Gender and race. So what does that mean for women? It means we've taken many, many steps back. And for race, all of a sudden, it's pounded open in ways that we thought we had progressed beyond. Anyway, sorry, I'll keep going. This is what it looks like. This is in 2011 when I was putting Rappler together. This is how we saw it, because for 6 years in a row, Filipinos spent the most time online and on social media globally. When the Cambridge Analytica scandal happened, Americans were the target, most number of compromised accounts, but the Philippines had the second most number of compromised accounts. The whistleblower told me that we were the petri dish. They tested tactics of mass manipulation in our country, and then when it worked, they brought it to you. The tweet or the post, the tip of the iceberg, that's what you see. And people will want you to think it's only here, that it is a free speech issue. But you know what? The crazy uncle can say whatever he wants. But it shouldn't be the front page of your paper, which is what the distribution system of social media has done, right? So this is the way it travels through society. The tweet or the post carries an emotion. That emotion works through social networks. What are social networks? Your family and friends, and it grows. And those social networks, over time, exerts pressure to change behavior. I always joke that Silicon Valley's ills would come home to roost, and it did on January 6th, but now we seem to be erasing that. Yeah, it's funny. I'll go back quickly now. I will really go through this fast. In 2016, we came out with a 3-part series. I wrote 2 of the 3 parts, and the last one was written by my co-founder. We called it The Propaganda War. Let me take one by one. This is the first one that we came out with when we had a bombing in the hometown of Rodrigo Duterte. So the countries issued these travel warnings. Within about 2 or 3 hours, we began to see this on Facebook. Man with high quality bomb nabbed at Davao checkpoint. The bomb was in Davao. And then we kept seeing it replicated, shared, both on the web and there. Why is that important? Because these stories were linked to a Facebook, to a story that Rappler did 6 months earlier. So this is very rudimentary, change your mind. What they did is they took an old story and they made it seem like the government took action even though it hadn't, so you would feel better. That's kind of not so bad, right? But it's deceptive. So I came out with this piece where we began to show you that you were being insidiously manipulated. Propaganda war, weaponizing the internet, shifting public opinion. This is the second piece that was done by my co-founder. I know it looks like an Excel sheet. I'm sorry I'm being very geeky, but I thought you would want to see, because it's very similar to what America's going through now. There were 26 accounts that kept attacking news organizations. So finally, I got tired of being attacked and took down every single thing they said they were, from their name, so Luvimin Kancho, the friends they had, this is back in the old days, so this is 2016, their Facebook ID, the groups that they belonged to. And it was strange because Luvimin Kancho, her photo, was only posting in groups. This photo, when you do reverse imaging, is a Korean pop star. Korea again. It's a little known Korean pop star. And then we took all her friends, 26 fake accounts, and we assigned every single part here to a reporter, where they supposedly studied, where they went to school, where they live, and these are the 26 accounts. Every single thing on this Excel sheet is a lie. These are fake accounts, 26 fake accounts. And then what we did was we counted how many others did they influence, right? Only 26, you figure, not so bad, right? At least 3 million others. 26 fake accounts, at least 3 million others. Fake accounts, manufactured reality on social media. This is astroturfing, right? So fake grassroots. So what we did in Rappler was we created a database because I wanted my social media team to know what was real and what wasn't. So every time, and we took this where we were essentially alpha partners of Facebook so we could get the data, but when it turns red, it means that it's been reposted at least 10 times. Now take a look at what happened on October, let's see what date, 2016, and look at how red it turned. We were getting bombarded, right? And, what happened to you? This is Sally Matai, a Facebook page that has been taken down. Look at the behavior, astroturfing. It's just taking the same thing over and over in different Facebook groups, and this is the number of times that it posted in these Facebook groups, right? You can see this, and imagine if you can see this and what's happening in your group. So we took the data and we mapped it. This is the first of more than 10 different iterations of how information operations work. It was so systematic that it was broken down by demographic. It's almost, and this is the way it worked, right? Let's just say Reno is fantastic. We want to spread that message. So this account is the middle class. This account is the mass base, so the poorer communities in the Philippines. This account tries to hit the thinking class. Each one will do their own message, but it will still give you that same message. Reno is fantastic. And then we mapped it, right? The same network was used to attack journalists, to attack opposition politicians, and specifically to attack women politicians. These are the kinds of attacks that I went through, because it's not rational. So the way I looked, my sex, I have dry skin, I have eczema. I'm not corrupt, so they couldn't actually even use that. But imagine they used my dry skin. So every time we did an investigative report or won an award, they would attack in this way. The end goal is to stop you from working. The end goal is to make sure to use free speech, to pound you to silence. Oh yeah, dehumanization. I'm sorry, I forgot to warn you not to eat. It took me a few years to be able to show you this, but the nickname they made for me was Scrotum Face. And the first time this was sent to me, it was my mom, and my mom was like, "What are you doing?" Anyway, yeah, the dehumanization part is a prelude to violence, because if you're not human, it's a hop, skip, and a jump, right? So we increased security, but even after it took years before Facebook took this down, but after they did, it still came back in different ways. So Vove PH is a Facebook page. You can see what they did to my face. 1,000 Cuts is a PBS documentary. They're so creative. They did this, right? You can't run away from it. And yes, you develop you become kind of like Teflon, but the hard part there, especially for women, is you have to know when to be able to pull that shield down so you can actually be a good reporter, right? So these were some of the challenges. So now that I show you some, the sizes of the circles are based on eigenvector centrality, meaning the larger the circle, the greater power to spread a message. This, very similar to here in the United States. The groups here were anti-Duterte. There were very few, far fewer, because it's afraid. There's a chilling effect. More than chilling, it was Siberia, right? People were dying. I had one reporter, every night she would come home with at least 8 dead bodies a night, right? So it's real. But then look at this. These are news organizations and Facebook pages. It was just overwhelming. The first time that it actually equalized was this day. The first day I got arrested. So there's always an upside. These are news groups, and look, we grew. Our eigenvector centrality was huge, and these were kind of the pseudo. You know what they are in the United States, but in the Philippines, we know what these are, right? So you can see the government account. There's that Vove PH that did the scrotum face. Anyway, every time this happened, I got arrested. I got warrants, 10 warrants of arrest. And my team would always say, "Maria, we got great crowdfunding when you got arrested." And I always say, it's not a sustainable business model, right? I'm not alone. 2022, the chilling, UNESCO came out with this, Global Trends in Online Violence Against Women Journalists. 73% experienced online abuse, 25% received threats of physical violence, and of that, 20% had been attacked in the real world, right? Online violence is real world violence. Now let me go to generative AI. How am I doing on time? So generative AI, this is my first deepfake audio. Oh my gosh, I took away the punchline. Anyway, this started circulating about 3 months after ChatGPT rolled out, and we traced it, and it was a Russian scam network. It's still open now, and they spread it through Facebook and Bing, and I want to share it with you. This one, if you can put up the audio. So they took video and added.
Today I want to share one of my big secrets. What helped me to become a successful person is to quickly jump into new opportunities without any hesitation. And right now, my number one source of income is a new automated cryptocurrency trading program. This is the biggest opportunity I've seen in my entire life to make a big fortune quickly. You can invest 14,500 Philippine pesos and earn from 120,000 monthly without much labor.
Anyway,
I urge everyone.
All right, shut up. So after that, I've had many more deep fakes, right? I'm telling diabetics to throw away their insulin. This is part of the reason that we've headed to 3, right? What's happened, and this is 2023. When Americans went to vote in 2024 was a tipping point year for elections, more than 74 of them globally, right? Major ones. And what happened in January 2023, Facebook began choking traffic to news sites. So you were literally getting less news, 50% less at best, right? In the UK, it reached up to 85% loss of traffic for news sites. In January, in 2023 also, Google began the search generative experience. 125 countries, the United States and the Philippines were in that, and they publicly rolled out generative AI search a month before the US elections, right? October. And finally, what does all of that do? It's this enshittification of the internet. Because it's not my word, Cory Doctorow coined it, but I really like it. Because literally you cannot tell fact from fiction, and there are no alternate realities. We are in Reno. We're not in Manila. Even if I say a million times we're in Manila, we're in Reno, right? So the enshittification of the internet meant that by March last year, Shrimp Jesus was trending #1 on Facebook. Anyway, so yes, it got worse, right? Look, and here's an example of how you can change history in the Philippines. This is 2013, and the story is about how Marcos wasn't corrupt. He just found gold. Literally. He found gold, right? This is supposedly, they called it the Yamashita treasure. So we had our own myths going. But in 2013, remember, Marcos, the only son and namesake, won for president overwhelmingly because we literally changed dictator to the greatest leader the Philippines has ever known from 2014 to 2022. Here's one of the ways they chipped away at that. In 2013, this idea that Marcos corruption didn't exist because they just found gold, not much, right? Orange are news organizations. The green is the myth, is the lie. You say it a million times, so 2015. 2016, the reason it's so high is because Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ran for vice president and lost. But you can see the news organizations coming together. 2017, they kept pounding it, and it grew. Look at how it grew in 2018. In 2019, it's rampant. During COVID, look at how rampant it grew. And 2021, we scaled up fact-checking. And this is part of what I'll show you at the end. And in 2022, super messy because people already believed it, right? This is people tell me, it's so hard to talk to this person because they don't believe in facts. It's not that, it's cognitive biases, right? That's our psychology working against us. We can do the same thing for the United States, is what I'm saying. When you believe it, when you seed a meta-narrative. Another example is Ukraine. The meta-narrative seeded in 2014 to annex Crimea is the same meta-narrative used by Putin 8 years later to invade Ukraine itself. So here's a graph, right? Let's bring it to the United States on January 6th. When this happened, stop the steal election, it was you introduce the narrative, you mainstream it, and then you normalize it. This is not Rappler's work. This is the work of the Election Integrity Partnership, a group, a collaboration of academics and journalists. It was seeded on RT in August 2019 electoral fraud, and then picked up on December 22, the earliest domestic peace in the United States. A year later, Steve Bannon picks it up, and Tucker Carlson picks it up September 15th. That's the mainstreaming of 2020, September 2020. QAnon drops it here at the normalization point. So the super spreaders pick it up here, and it's normalized here, and you have January 6th. What happened after that? This is 2023. This entire group that did that work is no longer working because they were the same thing that happened to us in the Philippines. Legal cases were filed against them. Stanford broke up the Stanford Internet Observatory that they had. Okay, let's keep going. I'll end with this, and it isn't depressing, right? What can we do? I know. Truly, you can do something. How do you rebuild trust? This is what we did in Rappler, because I always say that, the elevator pitch I had for Rappler is in 2012, we build communities of action, and the food we feed our communities is journalism. So 3 pillars: technology, journalism, and community. That's why we're building a matrix protocol chat app. It is open source, it's secure, and it is desegregated. Right? Desegregated. Anyway, so how do you do it? This is called the facts first PH pyramid. Really, literally, I keep saying, you have to draw the line, you hold the line, you don't voluntarily give up your rights, and then you don't do it alone. You collaborate, right? And what we did we would have started this in 2021, but the Nobel got in the way. So, fact-checking. 16 news organizations that did fact-checking, a quota, daily fact checks. Fact checks don't spread on social media, right? So what we did is the mesh layer, 116 different groups of 100 to 1,000 different members in each one of those groups. Every member of those groups, each of you, were supposed to share a fact check with emotion, but they couldn't use anger. And we mapped it every week. And what we found was that inspiration spreads as fast as anger. One more time. Inspiration spreads as fast as anger. And then what we did is this data was put in a pipeline where we shared it with universities. And because news organizations in the Philippines were so weak, we're the first attacked. You don't believe us. The universities then did a weekly press conference telling you who's being attacked, what are the new meta-narratives, who's benefiting, and who's losing. And then the last part of the pyramid were 6 law firms and legal groups, left, right, and center. And of course, the first people they had to defend was when we rolled this out, the Office of the Solicitor General filed a case at the Supreme Court against me. They really like me for, get this, prior restraint. That fact-checking is prior restraint. Yeah. Anyway, I did win that case, by the way. So we're almost at the end, so we can have questions, right? Let me map it. So when we mapped it, every week we mapped it, and we found 4 major groups. News people, when you follow news groups, you tend to stay together. Artists clustered together, activists clustered together. But this was the one that I wasn't so sure of, but of course it made sense because the Philippines is Asia's largest Roman Catholic nation. Faith groups were also important. And then what we did is we mobilized boundary spanner, right? Sylvia works with me. She's a boundary spanner to Germany because she lives in Munich, but I'm a boundary spanner to Manila because I live in Manila. Boundary spanners is how you spread information, emotions, ideas. So that's what we did. And here's the best part of it. This is the moment when facts took over the center of the information ecosystem in the Philippines. And it began, the blue are our news organization partners, the orange are our boundary spanner, and then the yellow is how we took over. This network is still in place today. And we're walking into our May 2025 elections, right? So it is possible, and it's data-based, and so let me end with this. There was, in April 2022, Dmitry Muratov and I, along with 300 other Nobel laureates, civil society groups, human rights groups, came out with a 10-point action plan that was really directed at Europe. Because frankly, America was kind of lost in space. You know, it wasn't, partly because Silicon Valley, right? These tech companies have spent so much in lobby money. In the US, those times, 3 years ago, $70 million. In Europe, at the time of the Digital Services Act, 125 million euros. They've taken over in terms of being the largest lobbyist. But here's the reclaim our rights, the 3 buckets. I like 3s. The first, this is what we were asking for. Stop surveillance for profit. We cannot have democracy if we're not transparent with the insidious manipulation that's happening, right? I say the 3 sentences over and over. If lies spread faster, what happens? Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, you can't have a shared reality. We can't solve any problem like climate change. We cannot have democracy. The only form of government that will survive when you do not have trust, the one that wins, is a dictatorship, right? So we need to restore trust. So stop surveillance for profit is the first. The second, stop coded bias. What do I mean by that? If you're a woman, LGBTQ+, if you are brown, black, if you're an ethnic minority, if you're marginalized in any way in the real world, you're further marginalized online, right? And then finally, the last one, journalism is an antidote to tyranny. I don't know if we'll survive, but I'm so glad to see the journalists who are here and to talk to you today. Let me end with the last 2 slides. There's a tech power grab now. We call it the broligarchy. You know him as Elon Musk, but he's not alone, right? So what are they doing? Now you have state power. So how does democracy die? Media, first media capture, academic capture, NGO capture, state capture, breakdown of rule of law. The tech power grab is meant to use America's power to roll back some of the laws that have been put in place in Europe. And what they're doing here is they're presenting AI as the apex, as the best that we can be. It's not. Jeffrey Hinton and Yoshua Bengio, who won the Turing Prize, we were together with President Macron in February, and they categorically stated in a room that we should not be rolling out this AI agent, the new tech, without safety built in. It's a safety problem, right? And what does that mean? Why is that important? One more. So I'm going to end with this. I'm going to tell you again, please try the decentralized systems. We began building it. We're investing in it because I think it's the future of news, a federalized global news ecosystem. We can bore you, but you won't get attacked. It's our 10 content rules of moderation are the same as in the physical world. And that's what keeps it safe. I'm going to leave it at that and take your questions. Thank you. I talked too well. I'm leaving him on the stage.
Take some water.
I'm coming back.
Thank you, Maria, for inspiring and very geeky, but I enjoy geeky messages, as you well know me, some of you. And I hope you had fantastic answers to many questions you have. But obviously, we have more questions. So I think we have a microphone there. Yeah, it's over there. And there's another one. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I have a question. How concerned are you about the trends toward autocracy in the United States right now?
I mean, extremely concerned. I have PTSD, because it's like, it feels deja vu. The same tactics that you saw that I thought about whether or not I would show you the US. I don't have the data in the same way I had it in the Philippines. But what I pointed out to you in the Philippines is happening here, right? And what happens in the United States will have global implications. Where the US goes, we go. The entire world goes. So extremely concerned. And the question I've asked so many people I spoke with today is, why are Americans so quiet? I guess because the lesson that we learned, and I'm the wrong person maybe to ask this because I didn't stop talking, as you can tell, because I didn't stop talking. Because when you give up your rights, when you voluntarily, and the reason I say give up your rights is silence is consent. And what we're seeing in America today is, again, very familiar to me because the three branches of government are checks and balances against each other. And when the executive branch, by the way, Marcos ruled by executive order, right? He declared martial law by executive order in 1972. But when the executive exercises unchecked power, the first group that should be pushing back is the legislative. But we're already moving to the judiciary, which does not move at the same pace as the legislature can. So here's the problem that I see is that if it follows what's happened in the Philippines or in Hungary, when you give up your rights, it's much harder to claw them back. And claw is the right word. So for example, in the Philippines, we had the largest network in the Philippines. I used to manage the news group. I managed that news group for 6 years, 1,000 people. Duterte took away their franchise, or in American words, their license to operate. They tried to cooperate, because at the beginning, everyone thinks they can duck and that you can negotiate. But they lost their license to operate, and until today, they've lost their franchise, right? Little Rappler, my lawyers told me I was crazy to stand up and fight. Like, they kept saying, no, Maria, negotiate. But I thought about it, and I think the only reason we could is because I had no other businesses to protect. And so when I was asked to go to the palace, I actually decided not to go because what was I going to negotiate? I didn't want to stop reporting. And if I went, then a very strong executive can twist anything. I'm only one little reporter. This is asymmetrical power. I tell you this because silence is consent. And it is happening. And I know the American spirit. I'm an immigrant, right? And America's incredible. But Americans have to stand up. Wow, so bleak again. Someone crack a joke.
Yes, over there, Bob. Yeah.
When I was a newspaper reporter before the internet, we seemed to have a shared common understanding of the world. Recently, at an Osher Lifetime Learning Institute, Ollie, a lecturer, a university professor from UNR, came and talked to us, and he made this point. He said, if you ask most of my students where they get their news, they don't identify anything that I recognize as the news. As a matter of fact, he said, you wouldn't recognize the names of the places that they get their news. If that is correct, nationally or internationally, how does a shared common understanding of the world that's now broken down into small, tiny little pieces of where you get your information, how does that make it harder or easier to defend journalism and democracy?
it's a formula for disaster for both journalism and democracy, right? And the reason why I testified at the EU many times when they were putting the Digital Services Act together in the UK for the Online Services Act, Online Act. Look, let me share, Nerve, which is our sister company, did a 3-year data dump study of the United States that we released in April last year. We released it publicly at the end of last year. What we found was that our generation, like if you're 50 and above, right, we still get our news from traditional media. And most of us are also on social media in some way. But there was a question of, how much do you trust political information from social media? The 50 and above said, it's 55 and above, and about 50 to 51% said they did not trust political information from social media. You compare it with 18 to 35 years old, the Gen Z, who get their information or their news in rabbit ears from social media. And I just showed you how social media can be manipulated, right? How information operations uses it. 18 to 35, those on social media, 60% get their news from social media, and 55% say they trust the political information they get from social media. Right? So that is extremely telling. There's never been as large a generation gap as we have today. I hate to send you to X. I'll tweet it. I'll post it on Blue Sky. I'll post it on Blue Sky so you can get it. But to your answer, to your question, the reason why we need a shared reality is because we work in communities. All it takes is psychological studies. All it takes is one person to make us think better. One dissenter in a room can make us reevaluate what we think, right? Because you don't want groupthink. So one dissenter will make you think, but one person cannot really have as much impact as a group, right? So, the book, Putnam's book about bowling alone, right? So what he's saying is in the past, our communities were around bowling or bingo, or we had shared communities. I just came from Sweden where they had something called postcode lottery. You familiar with this? It's actually really cool. Postcode lottery, it's by law, and what it is that a community plays the postcode lottery. It isn't one day that you buy the lottery. They win by postcodes. They win as a community. And so they play it, and it's a monthly subscription to it. And what was amazing that night, I was telling Sylvia, why am I speaking to lottery again? Isn't that like corruption? And it was the most amazing thing, because this room full of more than 600 people, they were giving out €1 billion from the postcode lottery. So people won, but they also played together. So anyway, that's my equivalent of present day from bowling. So communities are really important. And without community, we can't act together. Combine that now with, if you don't know what is true, what is fact or fiction, how will you know how to act? Right? So when we are isolated and alone, we are vulnerable. That's what's happened in every single country that's fallen off to. There's this new word that I love, anocracy, A-N-O-C-R-A-C-Y. It's a democracy that turns into a democracy in transition. So is that America today? You tell me, right? But I will say, it's fast. I forgot to tell you, in the Philippines, Duterte collapsed our institutions. It took 6 months for him to become the most powerful person. America's moving faster. Wow, again, I made it bleak. It's got to be the law, right? These tech companies cannot, for profit, tear down data privacy, cannot act with impunity in the virtual world. Does that make sense? Now I really am sending you home depressed. Oh yes! Oh my gosh! Our Pulitzer Prize winner. I'm going to give you my mic.
My question is, what do you think the young journalists in these rooms should do when they go out and make a difference to do something about this that you're talking about? What do they do as journalists to do something about this?
Yeah, awesome, Warren. Thank you. First, thank you for everything that you've done. But young journalists, at the Nobel Lecture in 2021, I said this morning, that we're standing on the rubble of the world that was. Deceptively familiar, right? But everything is destroyed. We're in the middle of creative destruction. And to the young journalists, especially those who won the awards who were named today, right? In your hands is the ability to create something better. You're not going to go out and get coffee the way my generation did, right? You can literally, you have to sacrifice a lot more. There's a lot more at stake. But I will tell you, in Rappler, whenever the co-founders, whenever those of us above 50 were too tired, our young 20-somethings were like going at it. So this is the time to build. This is the time to build better, right? That's what keeps me going. That's why hope comes from action. So it is really a privilege to be in the journalism school, to be talking to the journalism school, because you are joining a battle and we are losing, and we need your energy. He's nodding his head, see?
We'll probably take one more question that, over there. Yeah. Sorry, we have to go home sometime, right? So like.
As somebody who works in influencer marketing, I completely echo everything that you said. One thing that I do have a question about, though, is 23andMe just announced bankruptcy, and the only assets they have is data, which they plan on selling off. So I'd be curious as to hear your opinion.
The lack of laws around data has made all of us vulnerable, right? Frankly, this is my worry about the data Doge has gotten. Where is that? Some of that data includes, for example, like what would be considered opposition research for people working inside government. Right? This is, so 23andMe, that data can go to anyone now. Anyone can buy it. But again, not unprecedented. And this is already written in a book, Cambridge Analytica. How did it happen? It was a company called SCL that had government contracts from the United States, from the UK, Western governments, but they were being used to stop radicalization in other countries outside the West, right? But it also had data, as it turned into Cambridge Analytica, that were pulled in from Facebook. So what happened? The Mercers decided, when Steve Bannon came in and talked to Chris Wiley, and they began to talk about how do you nudge people to do what you want them to do. The Mercers then first invested $20 million to buy SCL, and this is in Chris Wiley's book. They took the data that was there from Cambridge Analytica, and where did they bring it? St. Petersburg, right? So again, we have been vulnerable forever because there are no rules against it. And when I talk end impunity now, when I say impunity ends, yes, former President Duterte was arrested. But the impunity I write about and how to stand up to a dictator, the bigger dictator was not Duterte, it was Mark Zuckerberg, right? So that impunity, if you look at it, media capture, academic capture, NGO capture. These same tactics that were used by Putin, by Duterte, are also being used by tech companies. So I really love tech. I think tech can be used for good, but right now we need to make sure that we are safe in these platforms. Oh my God, we have to end somewhere better than this.
The last question.
Oh my God, I will try to be hopeful.
Jumping in the back. Hi. So a lot of what you talked about and what we as young journalists are facing seems huge and global and big. But as someone who interns in a local news media newsroom, like how does local news play into it, and what can we as budding journalists and local reporters do to combat this?
Local news is huge. Part of America's fall, the weakening of democracy comes from the deserts in local news, right? Because they've closed. So local news is about community, right? There's a lot of stuff we could do with the new tech, right? For example, we could cover every single school board meeting. We could cover we could do that. We could dump it into AI. So what is the role of local news? Build community. That, as journalists, is the one part that we keep forgetting, because in the past, we used to both do the journalism and we owned the distribution. That's no longer the case. And the way we're losing our democracy is through the breakdown of our communities, right? Our strength comes from our communities. If the worst of humanity is what's incentivized in this, people are basically good. I know I'm an old journalist. I still believe that. I have seen incredible goodness. And so that's what, I think this is what, the last part, and I think I said part of this morning. We need to cover the world differently when you have a president who lies incessantly. So what we learned in the Philippines was that, in the past, as reporters, we learned to always report what the president says. But I think I talked about this morning. But the one where Zelensky was with President Trump and Vice President Vance, right? The breaking news reporters who were covering it did what we always do, which is, here's what the president said. Here's what the vice president said. Here's the response. But what the president said when you only say what the president said without saying that it's a lie, like Russia was the aggressor, right? Without saying that, you've fallen into the propaganda. So the first is stick to the facts. Remember the facts. And then the second, add context. Because what happened 4 days earlier? The United States voted in the United Nations for the first time against a basic tenet of the United Nations it helped create, right? So don't forget the context. There's a lot demanded of journalists today, but also incredible time to build community, to find out what the needs of our communities are. How do we bring our communities together so that we work together, so that we're not killing each other? Politics is not a gladiator sport. We don't have to kill each other. Democracies work by listening to each other and changing our minds together. So please smile when you go home.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for the good questions. I think I've heard some of the guests told me that Iggy's boys that have a proud generation of changes that you made, and then we'll have a new generation having changes and make great progress in this country, even with this very difficult time. And Maria, thanks for inspiring all these new generation reporters. Thank you. Okay, so we're almost done. So those of you who have attended the Scripps events in previous years know about our long-standing Scripps tradition. Maria, I think you need to come back here after drinking that water. So we have a Reno gift to you with a long tradition, and here is the gift with some the Tad's spirit included in here. So right. Here you go.